1 second, please, Jack. Um, 1 second. I want Laura to brag and tell everybody what she's doing Tuesday night. I am so proud of her for stepping out and doing this. So you tell them quickly what you're doing Tuesday night.
Well, there's a place in town called the Workspace, and it's a huge building downtown, and they rent out spaces for people that have their own businesses to use their computer systems and things like that. And they have art exhibits, and I was recently featured in a bicentennial display with my picture and a story about my 49 years working for the town of Manchester. And as I was leaving the other night, they handed me a thing of events coming up, and it said on Tuesday they were having a panel of spiritual leaders talking about the dimensions of time in their different religions.
Oh, interesting.
And I saw that they had a couple of rabbis, they had a congregational minister, a spiritualist minister, a couple other people, a pastor, and I said, but I don't see any bishops. And she looked at me kind of funny, and I said, I'm actually an ordained bishop with the Madonna Ministries, the interfaith community. And she was like, oh, you must come and join our panel on Tuesday night.
There you go.
So I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
I think so too.
Should be very interesting.
Yeah.
I guess it's about the perceptions of time. She said it's like different religion celebrations and afterlife, things like that, the different belief systems. So it should be quite interesting.
Go girl.
Paula
Okay.
sent me a cheat sheet. Okay, you ready?
All right.
Yes.
All right,
Ready.
comfortable. Take a nice slow breath in and a slow breath out.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, Bobby, ask a psychiatrist everything you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask. We are recording this, but if you want to ask a question that's too personal, we can put the recording on pause. Otherwise, we'd like to have this to share with others. So it's totally up to you. Bobby, would you like to give an intro, some of your background, so that we have inspiration to ask you for
Happy
questions?
to. First of all, I'm not a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist, by definition, is a person who's first of all an MD and then specializes in psychiatric disorders. Now, the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is a matter of degree of the kind of mental illness that they're experiencing. Psychiatry deals mostly in severe mental illness, such as schizophrenic, manic depressive, and other kinds of disorders that are usually lifetime disabilities. And they basically, in today's world, they basically dispense medication. They very rarely do the psychotherapy work that goes along. They usually hire psychologists like myself to come in and do the actual therapy. Now, some psychiatrists do their own, but I think most of them these days do not. So first of all, it's a question of their specialty. Most psychologists have a PhD. Does anybody here know what all PhDs stand for? Anybody? No? Okay, it means Doctor of Philosophy. So you could have a PhD in mathematics, you have a PhD in history, a PhD in foreign languages. It could be in anything that specializes in the top of your field. And that's usually the highest degree that the field offers in your particular given field. So in my case, being a psychologist, the high as I could go at the doctorate level's PhD, but I would be, if I were working in a hospital, I would probably be working under a psychiatrist, because the psychiatrist is, first of all, as I said, MD first. So just so we're clear on the difference here. So PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy. So let me ask you, are there any questions about what the differences in degrees are? Anybody? Are you clear on what they are then?
Where is everybody?
Got it.
Oh,
Or are you all on here?
We are
Hello?
here.
okay.
I can't
We're
see.
here.
Yeah, we can't see anybody.
Do
Only
you all have your cameras on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, most of us.
Have you
We
got
see
it on
you.
gallery?
I just have a window that's blocking half of my screen, and it's the background window that popped up for me to get rid of the blur.
Huh.
I don't know how to
Okay.
get rid of.
You should be able to click on that icon again and undo that window.
Okay, hold on. Here we
The little
go.
Caret arrow.
Yeah, raise your chat option. Don't want that. Okay, I guess we did it. Okay, I can see.
Okay.
Okay.
So what are some of the questions you have in terms of asking a psychologist questions about interpersonal relationships, which is really my specialty, which is how people get along with one another or fail to get along with one another. So if you'd like to ask questions about that, I'd be glad to field any questions you have.
Yeah, I have a question on taking
Yeah.
our spiritual journey and our ability to attempt to reach unconditional love and reflecting that in such a way so that our relationships can meet us where we are, as opposed to us always meeting someone else where they are. I've had a recent interaction where I literally wanted to use people's strengths to their fulfillment and then fill in the gaps with somebody that had strengths where we were weak. And I got such pushback that we didn't want other kinds of people or people who didn't meet the energetic equilibrium of our team to join. And I said, but that's the only way you're going to get that gap fulfilled. And so I'm trying to coax these people to understand that you have to accept people for who they are to get along in this relationship that's going to be more functional. Otherwise, we're stretched and we'd have to do things that we aren't so good at.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think you've hit upon probably one of the most important parts of any advanced degrees. Our first and foremost responsibility is to educate people. And that's the first thing we have to let them know, that that's, you know, the limits that we have,
Yeah.
and especially and what we can and cannot expect. So what have you found to be the most challenging thing in your profession as a minister? Is that the title you use as a minister? What do you use?
I use bishop sometimes, but most of it is just either the executive director of a nonprofit interfaith community.
Okay. So how would you describe what you do to the average layperson who would have no idea of what that means?
These days, I've been telling them that I bring the wisdom of decades of experience to meet the new technology and how young people are coming up and having all of these skills practically inborn. And those of us that don't have the technical skill still have a purpose and a role to play. And so I become sort of that grounding cord for the room and the advocate for what can and cannot go wrong. Sort of that, I tell people, this is the funny part. For those of you that are about to jump over the edge of the cliff, I provide the ledge that you're going to land on from the wisdom and experience that I bring to the table. So I guess a wisdom keeper.
I think that's a great way. And anytime we can draw people a picture with our words, we're much more effective than speaking in the abstract. You know, I was, in addition to being a psychologist, I was for years an international speaker. And most of the success I had in those years was because I was able to give people verbal pictures that they could see in their head. If we can see pictures, we can remember them so much longer than being told a bunch of cold facts, which we may or may not remember.
Yeah.
So being able to utilize that in whatever your profession is extremely valuable.
True. Anybody else facing those issues of getting a community of people or a group of people to be in consensus about things? When personalities or drama enters the scene, drama seems to be the perk that ignites things.
Well, there's really nothing wrong with drama or dramatics in communications. It certainly catches people's attention.
Yeah.
Now, whether that after a while becomes a little self-defeating, because see, we get to the point of playing, can you talk this?
Yeah.
And then now we got to go to extremes about anything to get someone's attention.
Yeah.
And that kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, the competition. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to ego? I had somebody yesterday that was explaining that there's the ego from the human and emotion side, and then there's the ego of yourself and your relationship with spirit.
Ah, good. First of all, let's define the word ego. What does ego mean?
Conceited.
Okay, Dolly says conceited.
Or self-importance.
That's a very typical response. Ego implies being rather full of yourself.
Right.
What else do you associate with ego?
Self-protection.
Yeah, protecting yourself. And it stores all of our defenses. What are some of the more obvious everyday defenses that we all use? Can you name one defense?
Projection.
Sally was
You
saying
Ah,
muted.
projection is a great one. It's exactly as the name suggests. It's like turning a movie projector on. If I'm feeling uneasy about something in my life and feeling maybe guilty or feeling resentment or whatever's going on with me, and you and I are having a conversation, and you say anything that sparks my feeling of discomfort with who I am and where I am, I feel very easily struck out and say, well, I didn't mean that. You misunderstood what I said. And right away, people will begin to defend themselves. Whenever people get into a defensive position, the number one thing to remember is to say to people, well, first of all, do not say, don't be defensive.
Yeah.
Because what are people going to say? I'm not defensive.
Put him on the defense.
Yeah, exactly. Put them on the defense. So it's like, well, the first thing you say to people is, if I sounded like I was coming on really strong, I need to rephrase that because I don't mean to do that. The point I'm trying to make is, and then go ahead and restate your point. Being sensitive to how others are responding, and particularly if you're talking about personality flaws, God forbid, and people think that you're finding fault with who they are or how they respond, or their interpersonal relationships. So I think the main key here is being very sensitive about how people can hear things in a very different way than we intend for them to be heard.
Mhm.
So the second you are aware of that, it's important that we all stop and say, let me state more clearly what I have to say here, because I don't want to sound as if I'm asking you to defend your position or defend what you've said, because I'm not. And then restate what it is you're really trying to say to people. Because the second we say anything that brings somebody's defenses up, you can see their face change.
Mhm.
You can see their their body language changes. Several years ago, there was a study done by a group of psychologists, and they wanted to say, you know, what is the role played in different ways that we explain things to people? For example, what is the role of body language? What is the role of actual verbiage that we pick? What is the role of tonal quality, the tone we use? And they spent a huge study on this. Do you want to just take some wild guesses? What do you think the actual impact of the words you choose have to do with the delivery of the message?
Oh, they're said. Are they said with compassion? You know,
Yeah,
are they said with anger? Are they said, yeah. I would say, yeah, a lot is how it's said.
yeah.
Your
so-
delivery,
Say it.
like your delivery.
Yeah, Dolly's suggesting like our delivery, how we deliver the message.
Right.
So what they found is that the actual words we choose, even shock value words, people who throw in words to purposefully shock us by using, disgusting words or words that we would normally use every day. After a while, they do lose their value. And all you have to do is listen to any kind of rap music, and you could hear that bitch loses its meaning, fuck loses its meaning because it's said so frequently. So words that are generally withheld to be shock value, if we're overloaded with them, we simply we don't hear it anymore and no longer shocked with. So the words were they found to be about 7%. That means that 93% of the messages that we're giving each other are not in the words we choose. That's pretty interesting, don't you think?
Wow.
Yeah.
But what's the other 93%? If it's not the words I'm using, what is it?
Tone, body language.
Big gestures.
You just said that. Two of
Right.
the major ones.
What's
Tone
behind
is a big one. Body
Tone,
language is huge. So what percent of all communications seems to be predicated upon body language? I want to guess.
75%.
Good guess. It's actually 55%, which is an overwhelming more than half. So more than half of what we say, the words mean nothing. They lose their meaning. It's what our tone tells people. It's what the body language is saying. So if I were to say to you, and you've heard this many times from people, of course I love you. Does that sound like I love you?
Not at all.
Or, you know I love you. That has a huge dismissive quality to it.
like you're saying it because you have to, or you feel obligated to.
Yeah, or you're trying to shut them up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, you know I love you.
Right.
And what does that mean? I mean, what that means is, so shut up.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
So the words diminish when we can see the body language, and oftentimes we cannot see the body language. Now we can see body language because we have visual, but oftentimes you're speaking to people how?
Telephone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there we're only left with what?
What you hear.
Yeah. You're then listening, they say, is around 17% of impact on the actual message. So we're missing huge quantities of what the total message is sending out. So it behooves us to realize that, as I say, the more we can do pictorial by suggesting a picture that people can see, the more effective will be our communication. Where do you find some of the, where are some of your challenges right now in communicating with people about your particular profession, what you do? You know, what are some of the biggest challenges you have?
I'm gonna mention not a profession, but the fact that I'm autistic, when you were just using those tone examples, like I definitely wouldn't have picked up the same thing as you guys on those tone examples. I often miss tone, so it's really interesting.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that you sometimes think that, or you feel that tone comes across differently?
I'm diagnosed with autism, so yeah, tone is a huge thing both ways with that. Often
okay.
my
So you-
tone gets misinterpreted, or I misinterpret or
I
miss
got it.
other people's tones.
At what
It's
age were
just
you
part of life
diagnosed?
for me.
Yeah, at what age were you diagnosed as being autistic?
What do you mean?
Do you have autism?
Yeah, I just said that multiple times.
Yes, because I say, at what age were you diagnosed?
Oh, just like 2 years ago
Oh, as an
during
adult.
COVID. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
this-
I mean, being an intelligent female that's functioning, it's pretty much missed, like, most of your life. There's so many people that it's missed.
Yeah, so it's very difficult when you have been diagnosed with something and you're not sure exactly how you're supposed to work around that diagnosis. it can
No,
be
the
very-
diagnosis has been great because I've actually like learned more things about myself and like it has helped things totally make sense, you know, and it's also freed me of like letting go of unrealistic expectations for myself. Like, you know, maybe I would have beat myself up for not getting the tone thing before, and now I'm like, well, it's like, you know, you're not going to expect someone who's tone deaf to understand the pitch of music well.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I have a problem with, I don't like to do a lot of texting because you can't tell if somebody really means what they're saying
Exactly.
in a text. I hate
Mm.
text.
And that's why when we text, particularly some of the younger members of the community, they'll tend to put in, certain kinds of, stars or things that
Emoji.
graphic. They catch your attention just to kind
Yeah.
of give your point. And good morning, Charles.
Good morning.
Good morning, Charles.
Morning, Charlie.
So we were talking about how people who have autism, or what's also been called Asperger's, how they learn to compensate for that. Are you familiar with the difference between autism and Asperger's?
Well, they actually, the DSM now puts them together. So Asperger's is now just called high functioning autism.
Yes. But there was a time when they were two separate. The DSM had two different numbers for them. Now they're under
Yeah,
one.
I try and just avoid the use of the word Asperger because of his whole connection with the Nazis. So just
Yeah.
go with autism.
See, I think some people here had not even heard the word Asperger's before. How many of you had not heard Asperger's before? Okay,
Me.
Dolly hadn't heard that. Who else? I can't see the group. Just say your name. Charlie, had you heard of Asperger's before?
Yes.
Yeah, he had.
Mhm.
But many of us had not.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to clarify, of what we speak.
Mhm.
Because people that have Asperger's or any kind of high functioning autistic behaviors have a more difficult time to trying to relate their true feelings to other people.
Mhm.
You know, what's interesting is there was a study done, and there's been more and more people with autism actually studying it themselves. And it was a person who had autism who did this study, and they put 3 different groups together: people who are all non-autistic, people who are all autistic, and people who are mixed, like that mixed group of people.
Correct.
And the people who were not autistic got along really well. And the people who were all autistic got along just as well within their own group as the non-autistic people. It was the mixed group that had. And so there's a theory that's going on that really it's just a difference and it's not a deficiency.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I look at it. Like, it's just a minority kind of a thing instead of majority. So majority of people are not on the spectrum and a minority are. Anyway, I just wanted to show that study shows that it's a difference rather than a deficiency, I guess.
I like that. I think that's and I think that's true in many different arenas in our life. Not this one area. It's true of many things that we miss the bigger picture by trying to pick out certain things that we find unusual and call, well, if that's unusual, it must be not quite right, or it's not to par, or doesn't quite fit with the rest of us, that kind of thing. It's not that at all. It's just that we are much more different than we are sometimes difficult.
I like that, where you're you're pulling out the differences as being something that could be seen as a strength. And I see that in the advanced technologies and the futurists, where the people who are on the spectrum have that genius and that brilliance to bowl through all of the old paradigms that need to be broken for us to move into the new age, right?
Yeah, and we almost always have to have somebody in the spectrum,
Yeah.
as you say, who will challenge it instead of saying, hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture.
Right.
And verbalize.
And then
Yeah.
carry it through because we
Yeah.
don't have the capacity to wrap our head around some of the stuff that comes out.
Exactly, exactly. And the nice thing about too, particularly kids that are autistic, I did a lot of work with preteens and teens and dealing with their own autistic behavior. And it's amazing how they learn to compensate and how they learn to work around or plow right through it.
Yeah.
And it's like really amazing. Have any of you ever had your own children diagnosed with autism on the spectrum? Well, the truth is, I think almost all of our psychological and psychiatric disorders are on a spectrum. They're all on a spectrum. I think it's just looking at the degree in which it interferes in our life, the degrees in which we can find ways to compensate, to work around, to explain to others what our intent is if we're not coming across in our communication. And you can tell by looking at people's faces. If they don't get it, they don't get it. You see it. And so before you go further with your conversation, when you see someone is struggling with trying to understand what you're saying, it behooves, we each have to take the responsibility for saying, it looks like to me I have not made myself clear here. Let me go back and see if I can restate this. And again, how you say that is critical. Because if you say it with such a tone of, well, since you're so slow, I'll say it again so even you can get it. It can be very insulting. And if you're very sensitive to that, you say, let me back up and I'm not sure I made myself clear here. So we can back up and then re-clarify what we're intending to say. It makes it much more powerful.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you
So
can
for
have those clearing communications where you just admit, I think we've got off track here.
Yes.
Gently bring the conversation back to a safe place to have dialogue as opposed to one person telling the other what to do or not to do.
Yeah, I think one of the safest words we can use, which is truthful, describes what's going on, is, hold on a second. I'm really confused here. Let's go back again. I'm not sure what I said. The message I was trying to communicate, I don't think that's the message I got across.
Yeah.
So let me try again. You could always ask for another time. And you always ask, I'd like overs, please.
Yeah.
Remember you used to have kids, King's X overs? You can have King's X overs. It's just a question of being brave enough to say, I'm obviously not making my point very well.
Yeah.
And without being embarrassed or feel like you should know what you're saying, or don't admit when you've made a mistake. I think if you admit you made a mistake or you could have misspoken is one of the most powerful things we have in terms of getting other people to want to listen to what we have to say. Bottom line is, none of us like to be talking with someone who's perceived as being a know-it-all.
Right. And this is making me remember, this keeps going over my head throughout the last 15 minutes of conversation, is something that my father used to say to my brother and I when we were kids. And it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And if what's going to come out of your mouth could possibly hurt someone, you don't say it. And, that has always stayed with me. It's instilled in my children. I have this thing in my house where I don't like the word hate. I prefer it not to be used in my home. My kids know how I am about that. So yeah, it's, the energy that you put into things and how you feel about them. Like, for instance, they know how important that is to me, so they don't disrespect that. They respect that. Yeah. So not
I
what
think
we say,
that's
but how we
great.
say it.
And I think it's incredibly important that your children feel comfortable in knowing
Mhm.
that they can say to you, "Okay, so mom, what I'm really trying to say is," and realize that they're not going to be disrespectful.
Mhm.
To be sure you're still in tune with them.
Right.
I think that really requires a lot of self-knowledge, being in tune with ourselves. So I can mention kids that
the
get that.
Asperger's thing that we were talking about, I have a daughter, and that's what she does for work. She works with children and adolescents with Asperger's and autism. And she's learned so much from that community of people. I can't even tell you. And real quickly, I just want to say I have another friend who lives in Massachusetts, and she just started a job, and the individual that she's working for is a gentleman who has autism, and he created this transportation organization for the community in Massachusetts for people that don't have cars and can't drive, have disabilities, need to get to doctors. And this individual just went to Washington and was granted the Eisenhower Award for what he did. So, you know what? We we shouldn't look at them as anything less than we are, because I tell you, I have learned so much from several of her students.
Well,
So,
a lot of these people that have been diagnosed on the spectrum have got
mhm.
bits of true genius.
And I think it's important also for me as a minister to share with people, it's might be part of who you are, but it doesn't define who you are.
Exactly.
That's really a really important message for me to share with people, because it makes them think about the situation in a positive way.
Absolutely. And because you may have some of the attributes of those people on the spectrum does not make you necessarily autistic. You may have some very non-autistic mannerisms and ways of speaking as well. So we're all a mixed bag. What is. So I think helping other people understand the clarity of what you're trying to say is the most important step. And I think it's for each of us to be responsible for that is what's important.
Well put. Thank you.
So, Nikki, what else do you know about autism for of your own personal knowledge?
I don't have like direct experience, except that I work with futurists who tend to be in the company of genius. And if they're not autistic and or on the spectrum to a degree, or a high IQ to a degree, they know somebody who is. And so we talk about people like Elon Musk, and he's truly on the spectrum, and he is brilliant and controversial, because he'll take that extra step and utilize his genius in a way that disrupts the way that mainstream looks at things. Yet, a few times out of the many that he goes out there and puts himself out there and fails miserably, he also succeeds wonderfully. And so we've got the Tesla, and we've got, the battery-backed electric car concept that's been proven now. And so that's going to be taking off across the world with other people now that will adopt this disruption of this pattern break that this genius person brought to the table.
And that doesn't mean that there aren't just volumes and volumes of things that he did that didn't go anywhere.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
lay there and died,
Trial and error, that's what life's all about, right?
Yep. And there's a lesson in each one. Yeah.
I think that's true of even those of us who have any affiliation with genius at all. even a genius can sometimes make a mistake or misstep in something that they're doing with other people.
Yeah.
So I think, taking ownership of that is the most critical part of all, which is things like saying, I can tell by your face that what I just said is not making sense. So let me back up and try it again. And I don't think I sent my message right. And requests for overs.
Yeah. Do-overs are important, but there is a point where you reach, maybe you can speak to this, Bobby, where you have to cut the cord. There's just nothing else that's going to allow for dialogue to continue. And how do you gently do that without?
I think at some point we come to a place where we say, well, Nikki, you know what? I think from my point of view, I see that maybe you and I can learn how to agree to disagree. Yeah. And maybe in this particular area, we'll never see eye to eye. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't have to do that with every human being in the world. But I do, as the saying goes, I may not agree with what you're saying, but I would give it with my life. You're right to say it.
Right.
And I think as long as we take that philosophical approach to it, that it's not so much that you agree with me, it's that you see that I will allow you to be who you are and respect that, whether or not I agree with it. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree with you.
Right.
You're not looking for my stamp of approval.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think where that gets into difficulty are unfortunately those of us who are sometimes people pleasers, and that we feel we have to displease someone, and then we try to do many different routes to win back over their affections or whatever. And that becomes cumbersome and awkward at best.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't work. You can't please them.
When I was a teacher at the university so many years, I had on a few occasions a student here and there who it became obvious after a while that they were on the spectrum somewhere. And it forced me to learn how to look at whatever the project was or whatever the difficulty was from their point of view. It taught me how to look at it from different aspects. And that in turn, over a period of time, made me a better teacher, I think, because it allowed my brain to open up a bit and to see things from different angles that I would not normally have seen them from. So I learned that people who are, I don't know, they could be on the spectrum, they could be from a different religion, they could be from a different culture. Everybody brings their background and their way of thinking that's been instilled in them to the problem at hand, or the issue at hand, or whatever it is. And you have to learn how to look at it from different angles. That helps a lot. Words are important, yes, but being able to free up your perspective and broaden it really helps in communicating the issues. Body language, tone of voice, facial expressions. Every human being uses all of their senses to communicate. We did that way before language was even thought of.
Exactly.
Verbal language, like, it was body language, and it was facial expressions and tone and things like that.
Well, let's add adding to raising the vibration or the frequency of our being to that.
Yep. That's incredibly important. So it's like, if you can open yourself up to learning in a different way or looking from a different perspective point, it makes us far more effective communicators, especially in our ministries. I have in the past few months since I joined the co-op, the artist co-op in Westerly, I have had many conversations with members of the co-op and people who have just come by to look at our artwork. And I find that if you approach people in a very open way, they're far more receptive. And it's not only your words, it's your facial expressions, your body language, your outgoingness, your willingness to connect. And that's what people are really looking for in the long run, is that connection.
And I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's the key to everything. Knowing that we're all looking to be understood.
Right.
At whatever level it takes to understand me or understand you. That's what we all long for. We want to be understood. And it's so frustrating for people, particularly kids on the spectrum. A lot of them will have these tremendous responses, acting out responses, when people don't get what they're trying to say. And of course, then the person who doesn't understand that that's how many of these kids respond, we don't know what to do with that, because it's a little off the wall to us. Like, my gosh, what's all that about? Well, it's because they're so frustrated, and they've been through that area so many times, and they hit the same wall over and over again, and it frustrates them horribly. So helping them by taking a deep breath and saying, all right, let's go back and start again. And clear up any differences that we may see there. But now we're asking a lot of people to be forgiving, to be understanding, to be kind, and to take responsibility, which those of us in ministry, we see ourselves in a very slanted light. We take pride in the fact that we do that automatically. That's kind of defines who we are. But the person standing in line with you at Walmart may not have that perspective at all. At all. So in dealing with the general population, many people are ignorant of that. And the word ignorant means no prior knowledge thereof. It doesn't mean dumb or stupid. Ignorant means I haven't been exposed to it before. I had no idea what that was about. So when we are ignorant, we need to be enlightened. And that can come in many different forms. Dolly's sitting there shaking her head in agreement. What are you getting from that, Dolly?
I just think you're right. I mean, that makes sense.
That makes sense to her, yeah. You know, when I was lecturing years ago, I would oftentimes stop and say, is this making sense to you guys? I mean, is this making sense? If it's not, let me know. So I
It's an
rambled.
excellent tactic to connect to your audience. It's like, oh, you really
Exactly.
want to know how I feel. They
Yeah.
love to hear that.
Is this stuff making sense or not? Because if it's not, what am I up here flapping my gums at you for?
Right.
You know, it's a waste of time. So I think being genuine is important. And I think the more we can convey that to other people, that we are really genuinely interested in what other people have to say, how other people feel, what they think, and what they have to contribute. And as I say, when you work with autistic kids particularly, you see that their frustration threshold is very low, because they've had this over and over again going on. Oh, I think I'm losing my picture here.
Plug
it in.
Oh, check, so we need to plug it in.
Is that what that
It's
means?
not just the stress, it's the constant like sensory overload that causes a lot of people on the spectrum to just have that, like, it's like the Pyrex cup analogy. Like, you know, a person who's neurotypical, they wake up, their cup is empty. A person who is on the spectrum, they wake up and, or someone who's in chronic pain, even maybe they wake up and they've got like a third of a cup full, you know, to start off with. And so they can only take, you know, so much in. So
That's absolutely true. So what have you learned about yourself since your diagnosis?
Well, I mean, that diagnosis and then also being diagnosed with EDS, there were the two things that just made my entire life make sense, whereas a lot of things hadn't. So,
You said you were diagnosed with EDS?
EDS is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's a genetic connective tissue disorder. So
Okay,
learning about autism and EDS both were things that just made like, oh wow, my entire existence makes a lot more sense now. So
yeah. So tell me
Great
about,
that you
I
got
wanted to ask you a
answers.
question, Bobby.
yeah.
In your practice, did you ever have moments where you had someone who you thought was like mental health issues and then like learn that there were physical things that were causing issues that were considered mental health issues? So like people who have like chronic pain can get anxiety, and then anxiety can increase chronic pain. Like, just did you ever have, experience people having physical issues that created mental health
Underlying
challenges?
issues that were masked at the beginning. Yes, absolutely. And those sometimes don't come to light for weeks or months or maybe even years if you've worked with a person for a long time. It takes a while to uncover the complexity of how each of us respond to each other, and also how skilled we are at meeting people's defenses when we see them and learning how to accept them and incorporate them as part of the conversation without making that person wrong. I think that's the key right there. That keeps communications open. Nothing closes communication like abruptly ending the conversation. Like, well, are you finished? Are we done? Can we move on? I mean, that's just another way of saying, I'm done. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I want to move on.
I call those communication killers, CKs.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and and if they persist long enough, they become relationship killers. The relationship falls apart because we can no longer have a reciprocal kind of a relationship with people that's one-sided. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
Right. It's true.
In nursing, there's a diagnosis that sometimes is the cause of anger issues, outbursts, and people with, it's called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And it's caused, their outbursts are usually caused actually because they're not getting enough oxygen to their brain, and their brain cannot function. So their tolerance of change and communication issues is pretty low on, especially if they're constantly on oxygen and they're very advanced. And those people can be very difficult to deal with unless you understand where they're coming from.
That's
And
a
nurse,
real great example.
yeah, and a nurse who doesn't understand is going to be the victim of a catastrophic reaction.
Yeah, and
because that frustration is going to be, you know,
yeah.
I tried to tell you 3 times, I don't want that, you know. And
Exactly.
but if you understand and you say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. What can I do for you? And then you check their oxygen level and find out it's down in 65 instead of 95. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And their brain is literally starving for oxygen.
right. And so it can't
Yeah.
think straight. It can't react appropriately.
No, not
So,
at all.
you know, you sort of have to be a psychologist as a nurse, because pain can do the same thing as Bea was talking about earlier. Pain can cause some damnable reactions in people.
Oh, absolutely.
And put pain in a person with dementia who can't tell you they're in pain. We had a client who every time somebody tried to give her care, she would start screaming and start punching. Well, we discovered her arthritis was bothering her. So before she got care, she got Tylenol. Once the Tylenol had 20 minutes in her system, she was fine. She was easy to take care of. But
Yeah,
again, it's being able to use my brain to figure that out that makes nursing sometimes more difficult, because if you don't know how to problem solve, you're going to have problems.
and you know why? That's why we need more saged and experienced people have been in the field many years to take that other person aside and say, look, I think you might want to consider this person's brain might not be functioning right. So maybe we'll see if we can cut some slack here. And there's a way of doing that that's loving and very approachable and very teachable. There's also a way of doing it that really ticks people off. And it's not you're coming from a don't do that point of view, you know, kind of thing. So
one of my favorite things is you might want to try it this way.
There you go.
That doesn't say I'm 100% right. It just says, well, try it. See if it works for you. That's what works for me.
Exactly. And making a simple suggestion as to let's see what else we can come up with together. I think we need to be a lot more invitational with people. Invite them to want to problem solve with you. Invite them to want to join in and help you figure out how to approach this other person that we're all having difficulty with.
Another piece of that is not taking things personally. It's like Paula was saying, you know, the nurse that doesn't understand what's going on, you know, it's just getting attacked and is like, what did I do? You know, but like a nurse who understands that there's a reason behind this behavior and what can we do to, you know, help that person with their own challenges. So like in so many different ways, not taking things personally helps a situation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, I think sometimes for me with the work that I do, I very often, I put myself in their shoes and I just close my eyes for a few minutes to try to get a perspective of how they're feeling and how they might be seeing things. And it just takes a few minutes, but it's very helpful. And it's helped me to understand my clients, the aging process and what they experience in a compassionate, loving way by being able to do that.
Yeah, the idea of knowing when to pause and when to say, let's just take a second here and go back and look and see where we are here. It's invitational. It's so much more powerful than confrontational sometimes. Yeah. And the more we learn how to invite people to participate with us, the more we find that they're willing to do that. Sometimes they're waiting to be asked. They don't know that what they have to say is of interest to you. And letting them convey to people that you are interested in what they have to say. You are concerned about how they are perceiving what's going on here. So that's really fascinating that we don't always take that time to reflect upon ourselves or how are we coming across.
Right.
Beautiful. Well, we're at the top of the hour.
Oh, sorry.
No, go
Are
ahead.
we? All right.
Yeah.
I guess we are.
Did you want to make one more point, Sally?
No, I think I'm finished.
Okay.
That was Carrie.
Oh, Carrie,
go ahead.
One thing I did want to bring up real quickly is partly through my stage of life, but I am so thankful to see a lot more people talking about perimenopause and menopause, because it has a lot of not only the physical symptoms, but just we're changing so much. And also lack of sleep is a major factor.
It's huge.
As talk about, you start your day with your cup with a drag in it, but you don't understand why, because people older than I'm 54. Many people older than us didn't talk about it at all. So a lot of us are kind of saying, hey, this is what it is. And we're warning our younger people, hey, this is what's coming. And, you know, just be aware. It's a transition. It's not the end of the world, but give yourself grace and don't be afraid to seek care and don't be afraid to seek help with it. And don't just suffer through, because we don't have to. This is a transition. So that I think that's been a wonderful change that I'm glad to see.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then there are those
And
of us that tell you,
Yeah,
you
I'd
will
like to
get
thank-
through this.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being so candid and so willing to share your thoughts and your feelings and your awareness of what you are doing in your own ministry. So important to hear your thoughts on that. So thank you all for being here and sharing who you are.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bobby.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Bobby.
Bobby.
Charlie, hope you feel
Okay.
better. We're going to send you good energies.
Healing
better.
prayers your way, Charlie.
Yep, yep. And next week we've got Terry. Go ahead, Charlie.
Bye-bye.
All
No,
right.
what about
Next week is Terry. She's going to do a guided meditation for us with some instruction prior.
Okay, great.
Good.
Next week.
Yeah.
Good.
Look forward to it.
Terry Riley.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Terry has so much to share.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
She does.
Please invite people that have not been to our gathering before to come and hear Terry. She's not only is she brilliant, but she has an excellent way of communicating to everybody's level.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's always easy to do. But she does a very good job of that.
Awesome.
Again, thank you all for being here.
All right. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you,
Wonderful
Bobby.
content.
Take care, everybody.
God bless
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Have a
Bye-bye.
great week.
Bye. Love
Blessing.
you.